Hey, what's up, everybody? Frederic Poag here. Inevitably, anytime I call out Democrats, I'm either accused of being MAGA or I see a response that's, well, who else are you going to vote for? Otherwise, this is how we get Trump. I want to explain why that thinking, which I will admit I used to take part in, absolutely does not serve us in this moment. And it will not allow us to move out of this oligarchy that we find ourselves 40 years in. So I'm no longer part of the Democratic Party. And while I may have to vote for the Democrat, I'm not going to campaign for Democrats anymore. I'm not going to push for the Democrats as a party. There are individual Democrats I respect, and I think that they're doing good work. But as a party, I'm going with Christopher Hedges' assessment that the Democrats are corporatists who now, it seems, are moving towards collaborators with fascism. The Republicans used to be oligarchs, the money party, who are now taken over by fascists. And that's the problem that we have right now with our politics in the United States. There is no party that is supporting the American people, the working class, the middle class, anybody but corporate interests. There is no party that's doing that. Anyone that tells you that there is are either lying to you or they don't want to accept the fact that both of our parties, our major political parties, have been co-opted by an oligarch class that has moved into fascism. That's where we're at. So, what does that mean? What is left to us at that point? Well, here's the thing. If my choice in a national election or a congressional election is between a corporatist and a fascist, I'm absolutely going to vote for the corporatist. I don't have a choice at that point. But they're both going to eventually end up at the same place. At this point, our politics is really about buying us time to try and claw back some of this power for we the people. That's the harsh calculus of this. Because we're combating white supremacy, we're combating basically exploitation of the working class and the middle class. We're combating unregulated capitalism, patriarchy, you name it. That's where we find ourselves. And the Democrats are no better than the Republicans in terms of outcomes. Only in what they're going to do in the immediate. Now, what does that mean? Well, MAGA fascists will deploy jackbooted ICE agents to Minneapolis. What the Democrats will do, and what it looks like they're going to do, is essentially say, well, we'll just give more money for training, which means more money to the police state, more money to contractors of that police state and lobbyists, more money for prisons, more money for anything but schools or healthcare. Now, you might be denying that that's happening, but let me give you a most recent example. So the House actually voted to put back in the ACA subsidies to bring healthcare costs down. The Senate promptly voted it down. Now, this was the whole thing that Democrats back in before the end of the year shut down the government over. And Trump just waited them out. Now, of course, corporate media was quick to say Democrats won the shutdown because there's these polls that blame Democrats and they're going to pay for it in the election. And the Gang of Eight, one who was an independent, Angus King of Maine, basically said, well, We had to reopen the government, but we got a promise that we'd have a vote on them. Well, they got their vote, even though Republicans in the House bucked their own party to push through the ACA subsidies, which I'm sure came as a surprise to the Senate, but then the Senate was forced to vote it down. However, what did they get and what did pass the House today overwhelmingly with massive Democratic support? Well, that would be H.R. 7006. What did it do? Well, it gave more money to Israel. And it decreed that the Palestinians can never be liberated. And $50 million to Venezuela. Now, if you're thinking that's reparations for us kidnapping their president, Maduro, you'd be mistaken. That is going to go to American oil companies and whoever else that told Trump no, that they do not want to go down to Venezuela because it's just not financially worth it for them. So we have no money for healthcare, no money for citizens to lower their healthcare costs when grocery prices are up, rent's still up, housing prices are still out of reach. The average American middle-class family and working-class family can't afford new cars, but we have money for Israel to continue their ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the Palestinian people, who we've decreed cannot be, quote, liberated and cannot have their own state. 153 Democrats voted yes on that in the House. If you think the Democratic Party is the leftist party, is the progressive party, you're fooling yourself. Chuck Schumer went on MS Now this morning on Morning Joe. And what did he say about ICE and the murder of Renee Good and the brutalizing that's happening in Minnesota and Minneapolis? It's a training issue. That's the problem. A training issue. Now, keep in mind that ICE already has $130 billion budget, more than most countries' entire military budget. ICE has $130 billion. We're already spending an additional $1 trillion on national defense, and Trump wants to have that increased by another $500 billion, 1.5 trillion, and we're technically not at war with anyone. But here's the problem. When Democrats start saying that law enforcement needs more training, that means more dollars poured in. You have to mentally and emotionally prepare yourself for the betrayal Democrats, especially Senate Democrats like Chuck Schumer, are going to foist on the American people. When this CR, this continuing resolution, comes up at the end of the month and early February, because they've shown they have no stomach for a shutdown fight. If you think that they are going to abolish ICE, disabuse yourself of that notion now. If anything, ICE might actually get a slight budget increase for training, even though it was DHS and Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller, they decided to have a 47-day training program, presumably in honor of Trump, who's the 47th president. Now, I want you to do the math on that. As a recruit for the Marine Corps, my recruit training was basically 3 months. 3 months long, if you include in-processing. 12 weeks. That is not 47 days. That's about double that. This is not a training issue. ICE is doing exactly what Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem, you know, the one who had the podium that said, one of ours, all of yours, which is reportedly an SS slogan. That was on her podium. Even in the Daily Mail, They talked about the Millers being a power couple. And what did they say? That Miller has a personality that's Himmler-like. J.D. Vance has talked with admiration towards the theories of Carl Schmitt, who was a Nazi political theorist. So has Russell Voigt. These people are fascist, but do you hear Democrats calling them that? No, very few. Because again, for Chuck Schumer, it's a training issue. What did he say after the shutdown? Oh, well, we want to work with President Trump. You want to work with a fascist? You want to work with a pedophile? You want to work with someone who is the most corrupt regime in American history by far? This is not tacit approval. This is capitulation. And we have to prepare ourselves for that. If you think we are going to make it to November, and that even if Democrats sweep in, that they are going to hold Republican fascists accountable, disabuse yourself of that notion now. So what's the solution to this? Because that's what I get asked a lot. First is admitting where we're at. And that may be tough. You want to stay in the Democratic Party? Sure, go ahead. But it's going to need a Tea Party style revolution from the grassroots level, at the county level, that is going to need to push out leadership, that is going to actually need to have fair primaries, that is going to have to get pledges from the people they support and back and put up to run, that they will tax billionaires, that they will not take PAC money. At this point, I don't know if the Democratic Party honestly can be saved. I think what it's going to take is a coalition, a political movement of independently aligned people. Because what we're seeing now with this oligarchy, with this fascism, is there's those who are in the oligarchy, which is most of our elected leaders who get their money from PACs and lobbyists, and then everyone else. That's where we're at. So, what can we do with that? Well, we can look to Europe. We're going to have to think radically. General labor strikes. They won't be very hard once the economy collapses, but we're going to need them. We're going to have to potentially have a constitutional convention and change the structure of our government so people get more representation. We're going to have to institute voting rights as a right, because that's not in the Constitution. Regardless of what you may think, it's not. We're going to have to back leaders that are going to clean house, that will actually say, I'm going to arrest the Supreme Court. Thus far, with the current leadership in both parties, that's not going to happen. What they're concerned about, and what it seems to be, is that Trump is out of control and they want to get it back to stability. But the problem is the oligarchic class doesn't give a shit about stability anymore. They don't care. That's gone. They've learned they can make money off the disaster, off of screwing the rest of us. Now it's about power and how much of it they can hoard and take from themselves. And the rest of us be damned. Because if we were actually standing up to fascists, you wouldn't have Chuck Schumer going on Morning Joe and saying the problem with ICE and what they're doing in Minneapolis is a training issue. No, they're doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is foment fear, intimidation, and chaos, so the fascists can take over. It's what they did in Germany. It's what they did in Italy. It's what Carl Schmitt talked about. They're following that playbook. Anything else is just tacit approval or collaboration. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Keep the faith. for democracy. I'll see you later.